You're listening to the Wanderlusting Wives podcast, your podcast for escaping life's monotony, indulging in your wildest travel fantasies, and discovering the constant beauty of this ever-changing world.
On today's episode, Emma Sorkin joins us to tell all about her experience living abroad in Spain.
Welcome to the Wanderlusting Wives podcast. We are your navigators, Allison
And Regan, and welcome to another Travel Tuesday episode, everybody. We've been really loving season 3. I'm pretty sure I say that every episode, but it's true, and I really just want to hammer it home. So there you have it one more time from me. It's been a great time, and today's not going to be any different. We have a great guest lined up for you. We've had a couple of goals this season on like topics we want to approach and like specific destinations, things like that. And this episode is to check off our Wanderlusting Wives bucket list, if you will. And we'll talk about living in another country. But before we get to introduce our guest, Allie, go ahead and plug away at our social media.
Yeah, first I just want to say welcome to all of our new followers. We've gained quite a few followers recently, so it's been fun to see where all of you are from. So if you're new here, welcome. You can follow us on social media. Instagram is at Wanderlusting Wives, Twitter at Wanderlust Wives, and then Facebook is Wanderlusting Wives Podcast. And if you want to reach out to us, we have a Gmail that's wanderlustingwives@gmail.com. So follow us. We post mostly on Instagram, but we do have Twitter and Facebook if you like to connect there. But yeah, I think that about covers it. Anything else, Regan? Did I get it all?
I think you got it all. You're a pro
Perfect.
at that at this point in time. Awesome. Well, we're going to jump right in here to our episode where we have a special guest today. Emma Sorkin is visiting to the Wanderlusting Wives podcast with us today. Emma is my coworker of now 2 months, and she's amazing. She has a background in education and journalism and a huge love for the natural world. So, Emma, welcome. We are so happy to have you.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
This is
Awesome.
exciting. I can't wait to
Yeah.
hear all about your experience. But before we get into that, is there anything like you want to share about yourself that you think our listeners would find interesting? What has your travel experiences been like?
Yeah, I think I grew up in a family that really valued traveling and seeing new places. So that's definitely where my love of travel initiated. And yeah, this is actually, I'm living in New York now, and this is, I think, the longest I've been in one place since I graduated from high school. So yeah, it's definitely lots of changes. Yeah, lots to share. I'm excited.
Yeah, yeah. That was one of the first things I learned about you was like this kind of intense travel history that you have in the past few years even, and like how COVID kind of played into that a little bit, and we'll get to all of that. So, I would love to know like where have you lived abroad and what made you decide to do that?
Yeah, so I was a sophomore in college when the pandemic started in March, and I was studying history and Spanish, and I was really excited to study abroad because I thought it'd be, the perfect opportunity to sort of put all of the language and cultural learning that I'd been doing into practice, and I would have an opportunity to sort of live somewhere and, take everything I learned in the classroom into the real world. And then the pandemic happened, and that did not happen. So that was still something that was really important to me. So when I graduated college, I decided that I really wanted to move abroad. So I ended up moving to Spain for a year, and I was teaching English. And it was a really wonderful experience. Yeah.
That's
Awesome.
amazing. So what part of Spain were you in?
Yeah, so I was in a really small town. It was pretty rural called Logroño, and it's in the north of Spain. The closest major city is like 2 hours away, and it's Bilbao. So um, it's in the wine region, which is really fun. There's lots of farms, amazing fresh food. Yeah.
Awesome. So wait, so if you were kind of far from a major city, what made you choose that specific location?
Yeah. So I did a teaching program. So I went to Spain to teach English, and I was in a couple of elementary schools. And I knew that I didn't want to be in a major city which is ironic because now I live in New York. But I knew I didn't want to be in a major city, mostly because I really wanted the opportunity to be able to practice my Spanish. And I had a feeling that if I was in a bigger city where lots of people spoke English, I wouldn't have the same opportunity. So the language piece, that immersion, was something that I was really thinking about. Um, and I've lived in like a few rural areas, and I really enjoy like the small town feel. So I request one of the regions that I had requested through my program was La Rioja, which is the wine region in the north of Spain, and Logroño is the capital of that region. So I ended up there, and I definitely, in some ways, got what I had asked for. No one really spoke English. Um, yeah.
Careful what you wish for, right? But, like, I'm sure that was the most incredible thing. Like, how was it navigating that kind of, like, language barrier and being forced to, like, just immerse yourself in pretty much every way?
Yeah, it was really hard at first. I was trying to find an apartment and open a bank account and just buy groceries and set up my insurance all in Spanish. And I knew Spanish before I went, but it's really different, like the speaking in the classroom, reading books, watching movies in Spanish, to moving to a new place where you have no choice but to speak in Spanish. And there's like lots of, small words that you wouldn't know, or I didn't know, like how to set up a bank account. Like I had no idea how to do it. But because no one really spoke English, it was kind of trial by fire. And I just was forced to figure it out. And I think my Spanish improved dramatically over the course of the year.
Mhm. Hmm.
What a dream. I'm like, yes, this you're just living my life. I wish to live. But so you were in the rural area. So did you have to also get like an international driver's license? How did you get around when you were there?
So it was actually really stressful. I did not get an international driver's license. So I was placed into two schools in even smaller towns from where I was. So the capital that I was in of the region had, I can't remember exactly how many people, not a lot, but the two towns that I was placed in, one of them was a town of 6,000 and one was a town of 3,000
Hmm.
people. So super small towns. And one of the towns, there was no public transportation to get there. So I had to carpool with three Spanish teachers. Like they drive me an hour each way every day I worked in that school. And that was also a really great Spanish language opportunity because um, two out of three of them didn't know any English. So I again had no choice, but it was really great. And then for the other school, I was able to take a bus, but the bus times in rural Spain are not that frequent. So I would have to wait like several hours after I finished teaching because of siesta. So there would just be a period of a few hours in the afternoon where the buses wouldn't run, which took some getting used to. But yeah, I made it work.
Yeah. Now, that's really interesting that you say that too, because like I wouldn't have even thought of that. Of so you're immersing yourself in the Spanish culture in this rural town, like the language, all of these things, but like that carpool opens up the opportunity to practice the language in conversations that you wouldn't necessarily even have, like conversation topics that come up where it's more casual and like lifestyle based rather than maybe like that kind of school setting. So that's really really interesting, and I'm interested. Like, what was it like to try and form those relationships while also navigating that language barrier?
So with the teachers, it was most of them were pretty welcoming. The more interesting thing I think was being in the town, and because it was so rural and small, people had lived there with their families for years, like it's generations of families. And so it was honestly pretty insular socially, especially with young people. They kind of already had their friends, and like that was totally fine. So I found it a little bit more challenging to sort of like befriend people my age, but I did become close with the teachers. Most of them were like, they had kids my age, but they were super welcoming and I really enjoyed spending time with them. And it was great practice too. They were really patient with me at first. Like I'd get so flustered trying to speak to them in Spanish. But they were great. Yeah.
So you arrive and you have some Spanish knowledge. and then they just kinda, like, toss you into a classroom and are like, "Hey, figure it out," or did you have some kind of, like, a course or something to prepare you for this?
So no, they give you no training. You're just kind of thrown into a classroom. Luckily, I had some teaching experience, so like I had some ideas going in, and I kind of, had like some teaching strategies, I guess. But no, they didn't really teach me anything. A lot of it was deferring to like the lead English teacher. So each school had a lead English teacher, and they sort of were in charge of your schedule, which classes you would visit. Um, and it really depended on the class. Like in some classes, I was kind of there to just like pronounce words and read things aloud so they could hear native English speaker read. And then in some classes, I would plan a lesson, and that was what I really enjoyed. I remember my favorite lesson was I was teaching first graders. They were doing like an around the world um, like unit. I guess it was a few months. And they had some parents come in like and then I did the US, and I brought in like one of my teachers had a little stove, and so I made pancakes with them, and like I brought in coins and dollar bills, and they were fascinated by that, and it was really special. So those I really enjoyed it. Yeah,
That's kinda
that's
crazy. They're just like, "Here you go. Kind of figure it out." Yeah.
yeah. It is kind of crazy. I feel like there's just not a lot of training, which in some ways is I don't know. It's kind of nice because there's no like expectation, but in most of the ways it was pretty stressful because I had no idea what to expect. So,
Yeah, especially you're trying to set up your bank account, find an apartment, and you're just
yeah,
like, "Now I need to go wing it tomorrow at work."
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. I They give you the in like emails of the teachers that you're working with ahead of time, but in Spain, they have a much better work life balance than they do in the US. And so I got their emails maybe in like June. And of course, no one responded to me for 2 months because it was summer break and they weren't going to check their emails, which is great. But for me, it was not so great because I was really, like, okay, I need to move and I need to know what I need to bring and what to prepare. But they did finally get back to me. So I knew that I had to prepare a like get to know Emma presentation for the first day, but that was it. I had no idea like how long it was supposed to be. I had no idea the ages that I was working with. I just kind of went in blind. So yeah.
Now, is that your kind of typical travel spirit, is to be a little bit more spontaneous, or was this just kind of like COVID was pushing you to your edge and you just decided to do this?
Yeah, I think it kind of depends. I think when I travel, I don't like to plan everything because I feel like there's so much that happens when you're not like thinking about what's going to happen, if that makes sense. I'm a
Mm,
big fan of
mhm.
just going to a city and kind of wandering. Like maybe I'll have a destination in mind, but I really like just wandering. Um,
Same.
yeah. So I feel like it's a little bit of both. Because I was going to be there for a while, I definitely would have loved like slightly more structure, but um, I think it was a good exercise for me and sort of like being really adaptable all the time.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like the one thing you could kind of plan for was that siesta period each day, and it's really cool how like it seems like a lot of European countries have their own variation on a theme, as it were, of like the siesta, or if it's like afternoon tea in London. Even it's just like there's this moment in the middle of the day to just kind of like stop. So what was that experience for you? Was that a welcome experience? Was that something that took some getting used to, or like what did that look like for you?
It definitely took some getting used to. I think partially because a lot of business is closed, and when I was moving there, for example, trying to set up my bank account, the bank's closed like at 2.
Mm.
They were not open after 2. And when you're teaching in a school and you end at 2, you can't go to the bank. So it was just logistical things like that that I found so frustrating at first because I was like I need to do this, but I can't. Um, so that was tough, but I think I grew to really appreciate it. It just goes back to the work life balance thing. Like I feel like in the US, like we have a tendency to become really consumed by our jobs. Which, has its pros and cons, but I think it can be really overwhelming. And I really appreciated how I don't know, like there's just time built in to enjoy like the other parts of life that aren't your job.
Mm, I love that so
Yeah.
much. I love it so much. Man, oh man, I wish it wasn't so hard to like convince the United States of anything because I feel like this would be the one thing that would be maybe the hardest to convince anybody of is to like stop working for once in their lives. But that's really cool that you got to experience that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, in your downtime too, like or like if you had a weekend or something like that, did you get to go and explore other places or like visit any other countries? What was that experience for you?
Yeah, I really tried to travel a lot. Partially because I was in a small town, so after spending I spent like a lot of weekends there because it was pretty fun, but I also wanted to see more of Spain and more places in Europe. Because of where I was in such a small rural area, I actually ended up visiting a lot of small towns in Spain that I probably otherwise would not have even known existed. And those were some of my favorite trips actually because it was just I feel like it's really cool to see like all the big cities, you know, like Paris and Madrid and Barcelona, and they're like super cool and they have their own really, you know, special parts. But I really enjoyed seeing like the places that were not that touristy and seeing like where people were living and just sort of different things that would not have been on my radar otherwise. So I really enjoyed that.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah, on
Oh,
these weekend trips, were you by yourself? Like, did you feel safe? What was it like?
I would usually go with people. So met I had two roommates, and they were both doing similar programs to me. And they were American, and we kind of met like a few other American people, some British people, and we would travel in like variations of that group a lot, which was really nice.
yeah. So what
Yeah.
were some of like your favorite of those small towns or the places that you got to visit while you were over there?
Yeah, I my favorite trip that I went on was a hiking trip in the north of Spain, and I think you talked to someone who did the Camino, and so it was a chunk of the Camino. And I did it with one of my best friends from college who was also doing a program just in a different part of Spain. And we met up, and we really did not plan it well, to be honest. Like we did not know what we were getting into. And we just kind of like had picked out the cities. And the way that the Camino works is like you don't really like book a hotel or anything ahead of time. You kind of just walk, and wherever like when you're done walking, you just see what's around. Um, but the way we had planned our route was that we were walking like 25 miles a day, and not just walking, like hiking. So it was really tiring, and we like it was just very poor planning. But it was some of the most beautiful places I've seen in ever. It was really hard, but it was so beautiful, and I think if I were in a city, I probably wouldn't have been on my radar as much. Um, so I really enjoyed that. Like we walked along the northern coast of Spain, and it was breathtaking. So
Mm.
25 miles. Wow.
yeah, we're
I
like
know. I walked 10 miles a day in Disney World, or like I was walking 13 miles a day in London, and I was like beat by the end of the day. I cannot imagine adding another 10 to 15 miles onto that. And like
yeah,
hiking, not just
yeah.
walking. That is
No,
intense.
it was so hard. Um, there was one day, and it, mind you, we only did it for 3 days, like because we had a weekend, and so we were like, "This will be great," just like a little like snippet of it. Um, we were so tired. There was one day where we thought we were gonna have to turn around, like we were like, we're not gonna make it. And it was like this really like I don't know, it's a crazy moment because we finally made it to the end, and we were like coming down this really steep hill, and we get there, and there's like hundreds of stairs going down, but still, we were like, there's no way we can do this. So we kind of just sat there and like collected ourselves. And we finally made it down the stairs, and there was a beach. So it was this beautiful moment where we were like, oh my goodness, like the water is going to heal us. So we like, you know, are taking off our like stinky, like hiking boots and socks. And like, I just remember going into the water, and it was so beautiful.
Ugh. That's like the light at the end of the tunnel, like the classic, just like
Yeah.
reward at the end. How
Yeah.
amazing that feels. Ugh.
Mhm.
I can't imagine. That just sounds incredible. So along this way though, did you take pictures? Like, are you into photography in your travels too, or what do you have to commemorate everything?
Yeah, so it's actually a really big joke among my friends that, like, no one will ever ask me to take their picture because 'cause I'm terrible at taking pictures, but I've been trying to get better. So yes, I have a lot of pictures, of varying quality. Uh, yeah,
Don't we all, right?
yeah, exactly, and I had actually made, an Instagram account while I was in Spain that I would post pictures to and, like, a little caption just mostly as a log for myself, to remember, like, everything that I did because I knew I would probably forget it, like, a few months later, so, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
We've definitely gotten to that point in as a society where it's like I have to take this picture because my memory doesn't serve me when I have like constantly I'm on my phone or like my phone is keeping my notes for me or my reminders. Like I just have learned so much to rely on technology that like you have to have the picture. Like Pixar didn't happen was a thing for a long time, but like it's totally true, where it's like I don't know, our memories are just I think evolving to be not as good maybe as they used to be. So those pictures are so vital sometimes to like remember those moments.
Yeah, and it's definitely an attention span thing too, like, I feel like my attention span has gotten so much worse, and when I was traveling, one thing that was really interesting was I had gotten a Spanish SIM card, so, like, I had a Spanish phone number so that way I could use my phone in Spain. But the tricky thing that I didn't realize was that my phone that SIM card wouldn't work in all the countries I was traveling to. So I had a
Mm.
few times where I would, like, get to a new place and realize, like, my phone doesn't work at all, which was super stressful, but also kind of interesting because, like, it made me super aware of how much we rely on technology and how helpless I was, like, without my phone.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was interesting.
That actually brings me to another question too of like when you remove the technology or even just like even if you have technology and you want to think about it in that way too, like what sense of yours do you value most?
I feel like I value my sight, I think, the most. I don't know, I spent a lot of time just sitting and, like, observing, like, even sitting at, like, a cafe in a busy area and just kind of, like, watching people.
Yeah.
I feel like you learn a lot by just observing and not even necessarily talking to people, just kind of sitting there and, like, being a little fly on the wall. So I definitely enjoy moments like that.
And what
Yeah.
a cool way to, like, maybe pick up slang or other, words that you wouldn't get in your everyday conversation or your academic language that you might be using in the classroom. It's kinda
They do that.
cool.
They do that in Eat, Pray, Love. I think where they literally just like will walk down like a random sidewalk, or they'll sit in a cafe and to learn the language or like pick up the slang. Exactly what you're saying. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
funny. Huh.
That's
Nice.
cool. I guess going along with, like, the language piece there, did you take any Spanish courses while you're there or just relied on kind of immersing yourself in that experience?
Yeah, I did not take any classes. I considered it, but I found that I was speaking so much Spanish and I was learning so much just by, like, existing in my daily life that I didn't, like, make it a priority to supplement it. There were definitely a lot of language schools where I was living, but I ended up deciding to just try the immersion route, and I think it worked pretty well.
Yeah, it's probably the best. I mean, it's free once you get there. So, just putting yourself in those situations instead of having to sit in a classroom or whatever their
Yeah,
approach might be.
I actually did one thing. I did, like, a language exchange with this one woman, and we would sit for an hour or 2 and talk for an hour in Spanish and an hour in English. She was studying to get, it was like a B2 certificate, like just a language certificate in English, and I just wanted to improve my Spanish, and she was Spanish, so it worked well. And that was really
Yeah.
interesting too because we talk about, like, movies or TV, so that was another, like, sort of colloquial, immersion experience.
Yeah. What a cool opportunity.
Yeah.
Like that should just be a thing that exists. Is it something that exists? Like could I go online right now and be like I want to learn German and like do a language exchange? That would be so cool. Like that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
so cool.
Mhm.
Um okay. So it's commonly known on this podcast that I love food. I love drink. I love coffee, which is a drink, I suppose, but like drink, I mean, like, you know what I mean, everybody, you know, at this point. So I want to hear all about the food, the cuisine. You were in wine country. So, like, how was that? Like, tell us everything.
Oh my gosh, I have so many thoughts on this. So,
Great. I'm here for it.
the first thing I'll say is I'm a vegetarian. So, I was really nervous moving to Spain. I actually and I've been vegetarian since I was like 12 or something. So I like really do not eat meat. And before I moved to Spain, I was so worried that I wasn't going to be able to eat anything. So I like trained myself to eat fish and seafood. And I like for the months leading up to it, like I would like slowly eat a little bit more. So by the time I got to Spain, I was eating seafood and just not meat. But a lot of Spanish food is meat heavy. So that was definitely tricky when I first arrived. Like I would be like, "Oh, I'm vegetarian," and they would be like, "No, like
No, you're not.
no, like we don't really have anything." Almost everything has ham in it, even if it doesn't say it. Just a PSA. um,
Mm.
but I still had some really amazing foods. The town that I was in, it was actually a very popular bachelorette and bachelor party destination because of this one street. And this street is pretty narrow, but it has like I think it might have 100 like tiny little tapas shops all lined
Mm.
down the street on either side. And each shop is like specializes in one specific tapas. So there's one place where you go to get mushrooms, there's one place where you go to get peppers, there's one place where you go to get a tortilla. Like each place has their own thing that they do really well. And everyone sort of knows that and only goes there for that one thing because they only serve that. So something that we would do a lot was when we would go out, you sort of pool, everyone gives like a certain amount of money and you pool it together. And then one person orders. And so they go and they pull from the pool of money to get everyone like a tapas and a glass of wine. And it's so cheap. Like it is just, it's crazy. Like wine was like maybe a euro 50 for a
Mm.
glass. Um, Food was also super inexpensive, but it was amazing. The region I was in was the wine region, so the wine was like incredible. I went to a bunch of vineyards, which was really cool. And they were also known for their mushrooms. And I don't know, mushrooms I feel like can be a polarizing food, but I I don't know. I'm a big mushroom fan, so
Yep.
yeah. So some delicious mushrooms, and yeah, yeah, like
Mm.
really good food. And I will say too, like the north of Spain has really different food from the south of Spain. So it's also interesting when I was traveling to like go to the south and see like all the different influences of food there um, versus in the north.
Yeah. Ah, that's so cool. Every single day. Like, that sounds like my ideal way to spend a Saturday evening or like literally any evening. You point me to tapas, I'm there. Um, so and you kind of answered one of my questions, which was like, what was the pricing like? So check on that. That sounds fantastic for my wallet. And when you talk about the wine, like and being in wine country, what kinds of wine are we talking?
Mostly red wine. And I went in like not thinking I liked red wine, and then everyone was drinking it, so I was like, okay, well, I don't want to like, stand out and be like, can I have white wine? Yeah, I think I just wasn't drinking the right red wine because now I really like it.
Hmm,
But I think it's also just when it's so much more affordable, it's so easy to try different things because it feels super low stakes. Like I'm not spending all this money on something to not like it and then be upset that I spent my money on it.
that's a
So I
great
think,
point.
yeah, like that was really cool too, to just sort of try everything and not feel as like stressed financially about trying things.
Yeah,
That's a
for
great
sure.
point. I have
Yeah.
one question about food, and then I'll let Regan continue to delve into the food because I know that's your area of expertise. But my area of expertise is dessert. So, did you get a chance to
Mm.
try different desserts? Do they have like a standard that okay, you have to try this if you go here?
Yeah, kind of. I think one thing that was really interesting was like the hot chocolate is super different from our hot chocolate. So their hot chocolate is like literally heated chocolate. Like it is so thick. and like you just drink it. And I'm not a big chocolate person, so for me it was a lot. But there was near my house there was this churro truck, um, and churros I don't think are really a Spanish food, but I had that very often, and that was delicious. Um, yeah,
Well, you can't not. It's like, well, it would be less convenient for me to not go. Like, you just have
exactly.
to commit. It's yeah, yeah. Um, oh my gosh, this all sounds so freaking good. My question is a little bit like pouring over into the cultural piece of this, and like how in the United States we're really kind of centered on like what is this food gonna do to my body, and not in like a health conscious way necessarily, but in terms of like a like just how we're looking and like being aware of like we're self-conscious, we're not. So like what is the Spanish culture's like relationship to food, if that makes sense?
I think the biggest thing I noticed was just that food is such a social thing there. Like the street that I was talking about, at like 11 p.m. on a Saturday, like you would see children there because parents go out with their friends and they just all bring their kids because they're a family and that's what they do. And so I think just observing like how food is such, and I think this is true to some degree in the US, but especially in Spain, like sort of the like social aspect of going out to get food with everyone. Um, I think that was really interesting.
Yeah. Very cool. I love learning about the food everywhere because I really do think that food is like an unspoken art form. And really, I do think we are recognizing it more as an art form. And I think other countries maybe see it as that, or at least we're seeing it that way a little bit sooner than the United States. Of like, it's artistic and it's beautiful and it tells a story. And so I just always love learning about the different foods in different countries. Well, I'm not going to take up too much more of our time on food. So because there are other questions that I definitely have. And one of them is kind of now going into that cultural aspect of your time abroad. Were there any particular aspects of the culture that kind of shocked you, or that like you had a preconceived notion about that then was just totally blown away? Like, what was that experience like?
I think one of the things that I didn't really expect was just um like the way that people communicate is different obviously, but sort of like the undertones I guess of that. Like Spanish people are pretty blunt just in general, like, and I don't say that in a bad way at all. Like, I actually at first, it was really, like, alarming to me because, 1, the language barrier, I was like, "Are these people mad at me?" And 2, I just feel like in the US, like, people aren't that blunt, or if they are, it's people that you're closer to generally. Um, but no, this is like it was just totally different, like, they just call it like it is, and I think it's actually really healthy because it's like, why would you not just say it like it is, you know?
Yeah.
But at first, that was definitely, like, really hard to get used to,
Mm.
and I think the other thing is, like, the hours of the day, so, like, life just happens at night, at least where I mean, where I was living in a small town, so also definitely, like, in the cities too, but, like, people would go out to dinner at, like, 10 PM, and there are a few bars and clubs in the small town where I was, and they wouldn't open some of the clubs until like 2 a.m. Or 3 a.m. So people are like starting their nights like when I would like to be asleep,
Yeah.
which was so hard to get used to. And it was fun, but like I don't know, my body was not, my body could not do it for that long. So
That's a lot. Like at 2 AM, I'm already asleep for at least 3 hours. Like
yeah, no, me too. But I was like, I have to experience it once. So we like stayed up,
Yes.
and saw the sunrise, and I was like, "Wow." I'm glad I did
Yeah,
it,
that's
but
incredible.
yeah, so
Wow.
The question that I really wanna ask is, like, how did this time abroad change you? Or, like, when you came back, what was that transition like too of, like, who are you now after having that experience?
it was really hard at first, I won't lie, like, I was used to not working as many hours. I was used to, like, a very relaxed environment, I mean, when I came back, I went from like one teaching job to a different teaching job. So I was teaching English in Spain, and then I came back and I was teaching art in the US, which I really like. So like there was definitely some continuity of like children are children everywhere, which is comforting in a way. um,
Mhm.
but I think just like the sense of like the social aspect of things, I think was really hard to get used to here after being abroad. Just because I feel like so much of the social life in Spain is like about going out. And you know, people do have people in their homes, but a lot of it is just happening like out. Like people sit outside at tables like in the winter. Like people are just out and about all the time. And I think that is not really the case in the US. And I think part of that is because it costs a lot of money, so it's expensive to go out all the time. Um, and I think we're just not used to like living life outside, if that makes sense. At least in a lot of cities. I don't think it's true everywhere, but
Hmm.
That's a good point. You think of like outside, well, maybe different for Regan, but us Northerners have seems like mostly winter, so like outside patios and seating are like only a thing for like 3 months here. But I feel like in Europe, I guess in general, it's just like everywhere you go, there's cute little cafes and outside seating and just time to be spent outside. Where here in the U.S., we would never probably sit in our winter coats and mingle with each other outside.
yeah, like I remember going down that street in my winter coat and winter boots, like drinking a glass of wine, eating like whatever
Hmm.
tacos I was eating, and I was like, this would never happen. Like I feel like that would not be a thing. So that was really cool, but also again hard to get used to when I got back.
This sounds incredible, and I'm wondering, do you have any like favorite memories or relationships that you made? Like any stories that came out of that trip?
Yeah, wait, I just thought of one other thing actually. That was like a
Yeah, go
personal
for it.
thing. Basically no one in the town that I was in wears leggings. That is like one thing that I did not realize would be the case, but it's like everyone always looks nice all the time, which is like so lovely, but I don't know, I'm not a person that like sometimes I just want to wear sweatpants, you know? And so my
Yeah.
friends and I would joke that like everyone could tell we weren't from there because some days we would wear leggings and sweatpants and like and, like we would stand out so much because no one was wearing leggings or sweatpants.
Oh my
Which was
gosh.
pretty funny.
I could not survive. I live in sweatpants and leggings.
Yeah, like, even going to the grocery store, I was like, "Oh, do I have to put on jeans?" So
Oh gosh. Oh,
Mhm.
that is okay. That is really interesting. I never
Yeah.
would have thought of that. You've shared so much with us, and it's just been so fun to learn about like a little bit of what it's like to live in another country. I know it's something that Allie's really interested in. Like she's like studied and done service projects in a couple of different countries, and it's just like it's really a completely different kind of travel, right? Where it's like that short term versus long term, where you really do get that immersion in every single way. So, I guess a last question for this conversation, and Allie, if you have another question after that too, but like, what would you recommend to somebody of like who would be best off with this longer term kind of travel versus just taking a shorter trip?
I feel like anyone that's even interested in it should definitely try it or consider it. I mean, it's hard, like, I won't sugarcoat it. It was really hard, especially at first, and I mean, I moved there alone. I didn't know anyone in the city I was moving to, so I kind of just arrived and was like, "I really hope this works." And I was super far from family and friends, but for me, it was I don't know, I feel like I needed that, and it was kind of a good exercise in like, "Okay, this is actually something that I can do," and I, like, kinda proved to myself, you know, like, I can do this independently, like, and it's gonna be hard, but it's gonna be worth it. So I feel like I don't know, it's just such a valuable experience, and I think you don't when you travel, you don't always get to experience, like, the full sort of lifestyle differences and cultural differences and, like, just all of the little things, and I think that's a huge benefit of living abroad, and I think, like, everyone in the world could benefit from it too.
Yeah,
Great.
even though you only had a year, I feel like a year is a great time too. You see different seasons and different holidays, so it's not
Yeah.
like you have to commit 5 years or anything crazy, but,
Mhm.
even a year is enough to get a really good idea of that culture and practice your language skills, so You've inspired me. I'm sure you've inspired others as well listening.
For sure. Well, thank you, Emma, for sharing all of this. I think we'll wrap up that conversation here, but we do want to get to our Travel Blitz segment. For anybody who's new to our podcast, this is just a quick and easy little segment where Emma has not been briefed of the questions that we were about to ask her, but we ask the same questions to every guest at the end of each podcast episode. And if you've connected with Emma and the kind of traveler she is, some of the destinations that or the activities she's interested in, maybe check out her answers for this Travel Blitz segment because you could maybe get some additional inspiration. So, Allie, you want to kick us off with our first rapid fire question here?
Yeah, what is your number one travel tip or hack?
Oh, okay. So I am a big proponent of backpacks. I think that traveling with a suitcase is so hard, especially if you're going to a bunch of different places. I only brought backpacks, and just make sure, like if you're flying Ryanair, like I was a lot, that it's small enough to fit like under the seat. Yeah, backpacks are the way to go.
That's a good one. We
I've
haven't heard that one yet.
I know. And oh my gosh, yes. I need to look into this more. Okay. So, question number 2, top 3 favorite destinations that you have been to.
Oh my gosh. Okay, this is hard. Um, I feel like, okay, let's see. Lisbon, I loved Lisbon. San Sebastian in the north of Spain was like an unexpected one because it's on the water and it's really beautiful. Amsterdam, I really liked because I was there when the tulips were in bloom. And yeah, tulips are my mom's favorite flower. So it just made me like, think about my family. And it was so beautiful. I mean, there's just like, I've never seen so many flowers in one place in my life and like so many different types of tulips. Like who knew there were so many varieties? So
Just makes me think of Danny Rojas and Ted Lasso. I love it.
All right, next one. Top 3 destinations that you want to go to.
ooh, okay. I really want to go to Buenos Aires in Argentina. I've never been to South America, so that's definitely like would love to, go there. Also really like to go to see the Northern Lights, and my ideal is situation, which is not super attainable right now. I really want to go to Norway or Finland to see them. Yeah, and then I guess the last one like is oh, I don't know. There's so many. I feel like I would really like to go to New Zealand.
I know it's almost mean of us to only have to narrow it down to 3. Like there's an entire world here, people.
All right, last but not least, what's the top thing that you can't travel without?
Oh, you know what? Packing cubes. Okay.
Mm,
I love packing cubes. I think that they are one of the best inventions ever, and they work in every situation. So
yep.
I'm sure people have said that before, but I really love them.
I
No,
think you're
not
the
here.
first
Yeah.
person. We've definitely thought it, but I think you're the first person to actually put it into words. So thank you for that. Awesome. Well, Emma, we've just had a great time having you here on our podcast. Thanks for joining us today. And everybody, check out, I'm sure we'll be posting some pictures from Emma or something like that. But yeah, just continue to follow along with season 3 of the Wanderlusting Wives podcast. And thanks for listening.
Thanks for tuning in to the Wanderlusting Wives podcast. Come escape with us again every other Tuesday for Travel Tuesdays.
Don't forget to give us a subscribe and a follow on all of our social media and wherever you listen to your podcasts. And until next time, wander on.